Good evening and welcome to the 13th Regulators and Policymakers Retreat being organized by IPPAI here at Goa. And I have the pleasure of introducing to our viewers Ms. Karuna Nundy, Advocate Supreme Court. Welcome to the retreat, Ms. Nundy.
Thank you.
Ma'am, we'd like to know, it's been all these years since the Bhopal gas tragedy happened.
Yes.
And the world has moved on, but Bhopal and the people who suffered over there seem to have been caught in this time warp. The basic problem being that they haven't gotten their due.
Mm.
What are the two, three main reasons that this has not happened in a democracy like India?
I'm not sure the world has moved on. I think there's a way in which the failure of the government and the courts to provide adequate justice to the Bhopalis so far is perceived to be a poster child of the failure of failure of governance and of the judicial system, the entire system, not just the judges, but the entire system. Um, so I think that there's a way in which it kind of remains a festering sore in India's consciousness that whenever somebody hears about Bhopal, realizing that all of us are so insecure in one way or the other, you know, that any of us could have been in that situation. Um, Now, why has it not happened? A number of things. I think one reason is that it was where it was. I think if this poisoning had happened in South Delhi or South Bombay, where some of us live, the result would have been really very different. Um, Also, if you look at the combined power that these 5 lakh people and their children and their grandchildren have, it's still a lot less than Union Carbide or the new merged entity, Dow and UCC. Um, if you, in terms of the lobbyists that they can employ, in terms of the bribes that they can pay, in terms of the senior lawyers that can be engaged, um, across the board, the voice of these people and the justice that they've received has not gotten its due. However, recently we have had actually a couple of important victories. So, for instance, there was 40,000 people were drinking water contaminated by chemicals like dichlorobenzene, like hexachlorocyclohexanes, etc., which cause cancer, which cause birth defects. So, children are being born even today, you know, that have come out of wombs of mothers that have been drinking this water with serious issues. Um, and Justice Altamas Kabir gave us an order saying that within 3 months, clean water should be provided. Then Justice Swatantra Kumar and Justice Kapadia, bench of Justice Swatantra Kumar and Kapadia, gave us an order saying that a very detailed order saying that proper healthcare must be provided and a breakdown in terms of computerizing systems, making sure that doctors are staffed in the proper positions, that health protocols are created, etc.
Do you think that our entire approach to the liability question, now that we're discussing nuclear liability and we've been discussing for the past 2 years, is it flawed? Is our legal architecture or our policy architecture itself to blame for this sort of a thing?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because there's a way in which the tort jurisdiction in India is not very developed. Now, what is a tort? A tort is a civil claim for damages, usually, which arises because one person damages another, right? Like now, the reason that a lot of people bring these cases in the United States is because the tort jurisdiction in the United States is very developed. So, for instance, if there's a company that poisons me in the United States, I will get a huge amount of money to compensate me for the illness that I have, taken on for no fault of my own.
Or
Right?
if I spill coffee on my thigh and I get burnt, I can approach.
That's true too.
Yeah.
That is true too. But that's sort of that's also caused by other aspects, right? That's also caused by ambulance chasing. Like, for instance, speculative litigation brought by lawyers who, you don't have to pay until they get a big, judgment. So I think that's kind of a separate issue. Um, So yes, I think over here, development of our tort jurisdiction, I think making our legal systems faster and making sure that companies abide by the laws. I think this entire thing around CSR, it's nice and all, and some people get helped, but abiding by the laws. If companies abide by the laws of the land, that is what we need most.
Do we mean to say that rule of law is really not strictly enforced in India?
Yes, it's not.
Oh, coming from a lawyer, that's interesting. And sanctity of contract and ethics.
I mean, as I was mentioning, India is 182, ranks 182 in the countries in the world. I think they're about 193 or something now. So we're in the bottom 10, 12 countries in terms of enforcement of contracts. Now, so what is the sanctity of the contract? Forget the sanctity. I mean, what does it even mean? Um, it's basically a self-deterrent in terms of the obligations of each party. And also it's, I suppose, it does get adjudicated at some point, and even though your judgment will come many years later, it will come at some point. So,
Had an interesting point. The fact that Bhopal, a tragedy happened at a particular point of time and to a particular set of people. If you contrast it with the situation today, where you have a very active media and everyone is interested in these disaster or tragic stories where there's a child gone down the bore well. So you'll have a 3-day drama play out and the poor child may emerge dead.
Prince, I remember him.
Yes, that's how.
No,
So
no, he
this.
was alive.
Oh, he was alive, but there are other children who've been lost, and
Acha.
came out dead. Unfortunately, despite the best efforts of whoever tried to save them. The problem is that we still don't have people held responsible for that,
For what?
for the fact that there are open bore wells, that there are people who fallen into it. No claim was sought by anyone. No case was filed against anyone.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, do you think that we need to reform our uh, our approach to this? Should the district collector of that place accept responsibility, or should the private contractor who's done that accept responsibility? Who's responsible for something like this? Where can
I
responsibility
don't
be
know very
fixed?
much about that Bowell situation.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. No, no problem. We'll skip that. Cut. Next
sorry.
one. No, 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 no problem. What would you think now that you see activism, in India, the fact that we've all grown more conscious? What role can lawyers play in, you know, informing the public of their rights? Because as you might well agree or maybe disagree, Indians really don't know their rights that
That's
well.
true. I mean, I think lawyers have a number of obligations. I think in a country like India, lawyers have an obligation to give away a certain percentage of their time at the very least to people who can't afford them, you know? Pro bono cases. There are some countries that require compulsory pro bono work. I think, in fact, that this should be one of those countries, like given the inequalities that do exist. Um, in terms of educating people about their rights, you make a really interesting point because I don't think that everything should be enforced through the court system. Um, I think that if people are aware of their rights and are even aware of how to approach the particular government agency, for instance, or how to deal with um, the other party, like say it's a company, and say it's a tort case, right? Um, I think even just the knowledge of what their rights are and what their legal rights are helps them dramatically in terms of accessing remedies from the government and as a negotiating tool with a company, say, you know? Um, I'm not sure it's necessarily perhaps it could be, this is something that could be taken up by bar associations, educating people about their rights and, I don't know, um, having camps where people come and they ask questions. Like, so for instance, I've been to Rohini jail to give them just, free advice about what their rights are, what they should be telling their lawyers to look out for, etc. And there were there were about 300-400 people and there were about three of us lawyers and just giving people advice about their rights. So of course in Delhi I think they quite a lot of people are quite aware of their rights and there are also quite a lot of lawyers. The challenge would be in a more far-flung place, like um, I don't know, in Meghalaya and Mizoram, how places that are slightly more difficult to get to, how do you make sure it happens there? So that's something
Ms.
that
Nandi,
one would have to
thank you
think
for
of.
your time and
Thank
welcome
you.
again to the retreat.